Hi, today I'm going to finish the series, Is the Bible Trustworthy? This is the third and final part of the series, and I'm going to finish up in the section of this book, Reason to Believe by R.C. Sproul. And basically what I'm going to do is lay out just some key points to remember. Perhaps they bring up more questions, but I'm going to finish up here with 6 key points here to remember. And these are not the only 6 points to remember, but it just happens to be the 6 points from the chapter in this book and from previous issues that we've discussed in the last 2 videos in the series. So, the first question here, before he gets to the points, is why should you trust the Bible? In other words, why is the Bible trustworthy? And the answer is you should trust the Bible because the Bible has been proven trustworthy. So the first point. The Bible does not have a mythical literary style as compared with other ancient literature. Okay, so he goes on to say that the frequent charge that the Bible is full of myths is not warranted by facts. People should be encouraged to read the biblical accounts of miracles, the flood, and other controversial areas and compare them with other ancient sources that do use mythology as a literary style. Whether they pass that mythology off as truth or not, the literary style is still mythological. It is different. It's much different than the biblical accounts of the miracles, and the flood, even the resurrection, and other things which people say are hard to believe or impossible to believe. Number 2, Jewish Christian history differs from the Greek view. This significant difference is a crucial one to understand before we evaluate the historical credibility of the Bible. It's an important key point, which we've discussed. Number 3, the Bible is not a science text, but describes the world as it appears to the naked eye. This is so important. Biblical, what people would call conflicts with science, must be understood in terms of common sense approaches to the quote-unquote phenomenal world. The concept of phenomenological description is important to master to be able to deal with this question. We should learn from the Church's mistakes in the past, such as the case of Galileo that I mentioned in part 1 of this video series. Now, this is such an important thing to remember and to understand. The Bible is not a science text. That doesn't mean that it conflicts science or that it contradicts science. Science will often contradict Scripture, and we must question that science. Because of course God is perfect and holy. He doesn't get anything wrong. Now if he gave us, let's say, the biblical account of creation in scientific terms, first of all, 1 volume, 20 volumes, who knows how many it would take, you wouldn't be able to contain the scientific information in volumes of books for us to have a scientific account of how God created the earth and the universe. Even if we did, we wouldn't be able to comprehend it. So it wouldn't matter. It's kind of like if a young child goes to mommy and daddy and says, "Mommy and daddy, how was I made?" They're not going to go through an entire scientific explanation as to how the whole process happened. The child doesn't want to hear that. The child doesn't need to know that. But they're going to tell it in simple terms, and it will be the truth. It's not going to be a lie. It's the truth, and it doesn't conflict or contradict the science behind it. So number 4, variant accounts are not the same as contradictory accounts. The charge that the Bible is full, of course, is unwarranted, and most of you, I'm sure, agree with that. But an understanding of the law of contradiction is vital to this question. Close scrutiny of biblical texts will show a difference between variant accounts and contradictory accounts, and we've gone over that. Number 5, modern historical research adds to biblical credibility. Historical research and archaeology have done much to vindicate the historical reliability and accuracy of the Bible. Important discoveries that I mentioned in the last video at Qumran, Ebla, and Amana, and elsewhere have exploded the assured results of negative 19th century criticism. And I hope you've looked those up, and there are many more than just those. Of course, the Dead Sea Scrolls is another wonderful discovery. Number 6, the Church's faith in the infallibility of the Scriptures. is established on the basis of Christ's view of Scripture. It involves a reasoning process, which is linear. It's not circular. It moves from general reliability to a knowledge of Christ, to an acceptance of Christ's infallible view of the Scripture. That was a very important part of the last video that I made, where Sproul goes through the reasoning process as to how we arrive at the infallibility of Scriptures. And this is not the only way to do it, okay? But it's a reasoning process. It's one which I haven't really had anyone give to me to their own position as to why God doesn't exist, or why the Scriptures are not infallible, or why Christ never exists, or whatever premise that you have. That premise has to be at least agreeable, plausible, and your conclusion cannot exist in your premise. It's just not good logic. Of course, I've been held to this kind of scrutiny, expected to have a logic for all these things. Well, I've given a logic, and it's from a good source here in this book, and there are many other ways, many other forms of reasoning to come to even this particular conclusion, let alone other conclusions that the Scriptures make. So, with that, I need to say that truth still is truth. Truth is not relative. This is not the truth for me. This is not R.C. Sproul's truth. Okay, he's talking about truth. Okay, the truth belongs to God. The truth has set us free. Christ said that himself. Okay, it's not my idea of truth. It's not R.C. Sproul's idea of truth. If everyone has their own idea of what truth is, then we live in a world of chaos. And we are living in a culture right now that's heading that way. It's very obvious. And the problem is that people try and take this truth and explain it away, and explain it away, and explain it away. Christians who are strong biblical Christians will bring up a good point from the Scriptures. This is what it says. Here's the evidence. You can see the evidence right out your window that God exists. And still, people continue to explain it away. And I'd like to read a quote from C.S. Lewis. And this actually is from a chapter from the book by Tim Kelleher. He's a PCA pastor in New York City of Redeemer Church, a Reformed man, accomplished theologian and pastor. He says, he says that there was a person that he quoted here that said that, it's actually a French philosopher, said that truth is a thing of this world. It is produced only from constraint, and that includes the regular effects of power. Inspired by this French philosopher, Foucault, many say that all truth claims are power plays. Of course, I've been accused of that before, but of course it's not my truth, so it can't be a power play. But the objection that all truth is a power play falls prey to the same problem as the objection that all truth is culturally conditioned. If you try to explain away all assertions of truth as one or the other, or something else, you find yourself in an untenable position. Okay, and here's what C.S. Lewis writes in a book called The Abolition of Man. Now, I think everybody knows who C.S. Lewis is. But you cannot go on explaining away forever. You will find that you have explained explanation itself away. You cannot go on seeing through things forever. The whole point of seeing through something is to see something through it. It is good that the window should be transparent because the street or the garden beyond it is opaque. In other words, we can see a garden through a window. How if you saw the garden, or saw through the garden too, if the garden was transparent? A wholly transparent world is an invisible world. To see through all things is the same as not to see. You want to see through Christianity, you better see something through it. But I can guarantee you, you're not going to see anything. It's an invisible world. So I hope you've enjoyed the series. Of course, I haven't answered every question there is. That was not my goal. My goal was to handle some objections, to offer some logic, to these areas, and to have some good discussions. So I welcome your comments, and I'll respond as best as I can, and I will see you next time. Thanks.